Welcome to the DNA podcast. I'm so glad you've joined it. Hey, if the DNA podcast has been a blessing to you, if it's been an encouragement to you in any way, if you found it valuable, do me a favor, like the podcast, share it with your friends. We want to be a blessing to as many ministries as possible. So glad you're with us today. And today I'm excited about the topic. We're going to talk today about building fundable ministries and programs with integrity, specifically as it pertains to finding and using grant money. And on our last podcast, we had two special guests that are also with us on this one, and that's Dianna Rivera and Keisha Pearson. They are in Miami. They serve at Citi Church in Miami, Florida, and they have for over 20 years been involved in finding and accessing grant funds that are available and then using them to do outreach in the city of Miami. And they have a huge footprint there. It's incredible what God's doing. But not only that, they, along with Tony Rivera, are the co-authors of this incredible book called Provision for the Vision. So Dianna and Keisha, thanks for joining with us again today.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. It's an honor.
Let's just jump right in. We covered some incredible things last time. We kind of got to have a shift and really focus on these fundable ministries. So let's just start with this. Give me three qualities that you look for, maybe when you're talking with people, consulting people, or even assessing your own ideas. Three qualities you look for that ultimately will make an outreach idea fundable.
Three things. I think the vision is clear. Like that, there has to be a clarity around the vision. I think there has to be a team in place, and your organization needs to be grant ready.
Okay. So let's talk about the idea itself, right? Have you ever said, oh, we need to be doing this. What if we had this idea? And then looked at it and said, you know what? That's not fundable. Or have all the ideas you've come up with, you look and say, you know what? We could get funds for this.
Yeah, I mean, in our unique case, I think because we have an understanding that funding follows impact for people, not things so much, not buildings. We understand that. So because we already have that context, when we think about ideas, we're thinking about what can we do to reach more people. And it doesn't mean that there aren't grants for things, but it's in the context of helping people, right? So, in that kind of a sense, as long as what we have found is that if you're thinking in that sort of funnel, then most things do become fundable. It's just finding someone who has the funds for that thing.
Find somebody who has a heart for it, that has the funds waiting for it, right? No, that's incredible. I love the fact that the funding follows impact for people, because that's really what it's all about. It's not just about getting the funds. It's the end result of what's going to happen because we access these funds. As a matter of fact, just a few minutes before we started this podcast, we were having a conversation about, hey, what's a story that you could relate to people that says, hey, we accessed funds for this, and here is an outcome of somebody's life that was touched. You got a story or two you can share real quick?
Well, one story that comes to mind is a family that had two girls from a blended family, and their children started attending our after-school program, which was a grant-funded program. And because of the program, we built relationship with the family, with the girls, and eventually that family gave their heart to Jesus for the first time and saw their family restored and continued to build a strong family together. Now, that's just one impact. Because we had a grant-funded after-school outreach program, we were able to see an entire family come to know Christ. Another example could be a young man that came from a very troubled home, was not in the foster system, but had actually lived with multiple families. And when he began to attend our school, he joined our football team, which both were grant funded, and went on a trip outside of Miami to play football. It was the first time that his world expanded outside of the city and the neighborhood that he grew up in. And he went on to get a scholarship and play college ball in another state. But his life was completely transformed because of our ability to have grant funds and to take him on something that expanded his world. His life was changed.
That's incredible. It's just so important to remember that we're not just going after money for money's sake or to build a big ministry. We're going after the money because on the other side of this initiative that hopefully is a God-given vision for us as churches, there's people whose lives are going to be impacted for eternity. So that's incredible. So as
a matter of fact, I want to add this because it's just kind of popped in my head right now. We actually recently went to a conference, actually in Fort Myers. We were in Fort Myers, and we met, we already knew her. There was a young lady who attended our summer camp and after school program years ago that has since moved. And we were at the conference and she saw us and she just said, I had to come and say thank you because of her participation in our after school and summer camp program, that she is serving the Lord right now, today in Fort Myers. And so that's a testimony of the impact of what happens when you're having programs that are grant funded and lives become changed. And she told us herself, she said, if it weren't for you guys, I would not have been introduced to the Lord. And I just want to thank you. And so to have a story like that is so impactful because you never know like how far the reach is going to go.
Yeah. And that's so incredible because she's actually in our church too. So that was kind of crazy. She's in my church. It's amazing. That's so good.
Yeah.
So how have you in the past gone about finding a real community need and then prove it without having to become like a data scientist for all these to access the grants?
Well, I'll kind of flip that question a little bit because I think that if you're going to be in ministry and you're going to accept the call of Jesus, you kind of have to be a data scientist. And what do I mean by that? I don't mean geeking out and like running numbers and charts, but I mean, you have to be in a space where you're always asking the question, why? You're always asking questions, how? You're always looking at things from a perspective of if this person came and they're not here, or if this person's life wasn't changed, like what could we have done differently? How do I reach this person? You're always in an inquisitive kind of space. And I think that when we as leaders and pastors and ministers of the gospel stay in that space of asking questions, we are really analyzing data all the time. It just may not be on a spreadsheet and a chart with pie graphs and those kinds of things, but it is vital to the life of any ministry. If you want to be successful, you kind of have to know. And when it comes to the community, it's the same thing. It's like, what are people looking for? What need can we reach? And it's about asking those questions. We ask questions of ourselves, but we also ask questions of the community. Like, what would make you want to? I mean, I deal with teenagers and work with them a lot. And sometimes I'll ask them, like, what would make you read your Bible more? You know, if that's the question. And it's like, sometimes the inquisitiveness of what we do is what drives the need for whatever service or whatever approach we're going to take, whether it's an outreach, whether it's a ministry, whether it's us just trying to get better at what we do. I think it's necessary.
No, that's really good. Constantly staying in a learner mindset to find out what's happening, what's going on, and what are possibilities. That's really good.
And I say that also because things do change, things do shift. You know, Miami for us is not the same city that it was 20 years ago when we started. And if we are not constantly asking the questions about what's happening now, the needs of our community 20 years ago are different than the needs of our community now. And so for us to be effective, to be sustainable, to have longevity, we have to keep looking and asking the question, what does our community need now? And what do we have in our hands to be able to reach people where they are? And so for us, that has also the ability to, the way I say it, to be flexible and moldable, to shift and to assess what is happening around us, and then to move with that is what keeps us relevant without compromising the gospel, because we're relevant for the sake of reaching people. We're not relevant just trying to attract a crowd. We're relevant in the saying, okay, God, if you have us here and things are changing around us, we cannot be oblivious to that. We have to open ourselves up and say, okay, what does my city need now? And what can I provide? Because my city is different, but we're also different. God's changed us. God's transformed us. What we have to offer, we've grown, we've learned. And if we keep moving in that space, then we continue to have funding. We've had 20 years of funding, but the funding hasn't been the same, right? It's shifted and we've done things differently. Our heart has been reaching children, reaching families. But the way that we do that constantly changes based on what the needs are.
Yeah, that's so good. And you really just told a story too, if you realize it, but you said that Miami, and specifically the neighborhood where your ministry is way different than it was 20 years ago. And
oh, yeah, absolutely.
I can just validate that because I remember going there 20 years ago and I thought, oh my goodness, they're planting a church here. What? They're going in the deep end. This is incredible, right? And then I've been there recently and it looks totally different. There's things like within walking distance of where the church is that weren't there 20 years ago that have represented community transformation. And I believe, and I think you all do too, that what Citi Church and what you guys have done through all the different programs has been a major impact there. And that's some of the results. So that's incredible. That's incredible. What if we were to think about like scope of outreach idea, maybe the size of a first program for a small to mid-sized church, how do you think in terms of what's appropriate?
That's a really good question. And I think my first answer would be to don't limit yourself. Because I don't think that you couldn't have been any smaller than we were to get the grants that we got to reach the children in the community that we met. So I think you can't limit yourself just because you are a small or a mid-sized church doesn't mean that you only qualify for small grants. You can be a small church and you may qualify for a larger grant than even some large churches, right? Because you may have more people with more vision. You might, right? I'm not trying to compare, but I'm saying you can't limit yourself just because you're a small church to, I can only start with something small. No, I think that that's a mindset shift that you can start with whatever you have the vision for and whatever you have the heart to go after.
That's really good. I think the way that landed for me is to remind people and make the distinction that a grant's not a loan. So these funders aren't looking to your income, et cetera. They are looking to your stewardship, how you've stewarded what's come in. But the grant comes based on vision and your ability that you can demonstrate that you can execute the vision that you have. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Right. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. So good.
And every small church already knows how to do that. Right. Because they're already doing it. They're already proving that they can do it.
So you're not too small. Your church is not too small, nor is it too large to go after money that's available. And man, if there's money out there available for kingdom purpose, by all means, we ought to be going after it.
Right.
And if we don't, somebody else will that might not have kingdom purpose in mind. They might have great ideas, but not from kingdom perspective. So let's say we have an idea, and now we've got to build a proposal. Just to give highlight, I mean, I know really a lot of this you're going to want to go over with each person based on their proposal, but are there standard sections that most proposals ask for, like typical things in each proposal that need to be in there when you're actually going after a grant?
There are, and I think we actually have a whole, there's a chapter in our book, our nuts and bolts chapter, that actually goes through all of those things. Most grant funders have the same types of questions. They might word it differently. And they might have some of their own. But there's standard things like, what's your history? What's your past performance? What have you already done that has proven success? What is your vision? How many people do you want to reach? They might be looking for your budget, your staffing plan. Who's going to do the vision? Who's dedicated to carrying it out? Is it paid staff? Is it volunteer staff? How are you going to spend the funds? And oftentimes I'll also ask for an implementation table, which means like, for most of us as ministries or nonprofits, we've held an event, let's say. So we have a plan of when things have to be executed. So grant funders want to see the same thing. They just want to know that you have a plan of execution of what you said that you're going to do. Most of these things are not hard questions, right? They do demand some preparation and some clarity around your vision. But it's oftentimes things that we can answer if we put our mind to focusing on the program or the event that we want to do. We can put the language to answering these questions.
Yeah. So the way I understand it is that, most grants aren't going to say, okay, we're going to give you this money for the next 15 or 20 years. It's usually a much shorter period of time. Some of them are even annual. Is that correct? So you have to renew them annually. How do you set up a program so that it continues after the initial award? And then what does that renewal process usually require?
That's a great question. I think it depends. It varies a little bit from funder to funder. Typically, let's say you may have some grant funders that they will award you a certain dollar amount, and it may be over a 5-year time period, right? But you need to know that every year in that 5-year time period, they're going to be seeing the progress that you've made over the 5 years. It's not necessarily like, as long as you are meeting your deliverables and meeting the objectives of what you had, then it's just a matter of where do we need to tweak things, what went well this past year, what are your numbers looking like, do we need to move monies around in your budget. The renewal piece is a lot easier than the initial proposal and the award. But once you've got proven success, that's the really thing. Success begets success, right? And once you have proven success, then the renewal becomes a lot easier because you're banking on history now. You've already proven that you've been able to manage those funds. You've proven that whether it's with that funder or with a different funder. And so you bring all of that history of success with you in every subsequent proposal. So that makes life a little bit easier once you get started.
No, that's really good. So in the renewal, the way I heard it, there's like a progress examination. They want to know what's happened, right?
Right.
So how do you describe those outcomes and success metrics in a way that fits both ministry values and funder expectations?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that all happens in the proposal, right? So let's say it's probably easier to do it with a practical example, right?
Yeah.
So I'll talk about one of our programs that we did. So we had a young lady in our church at one point in time. She loved teenagers and she loved food. Those were her two things. So she came to us and she said, hey, I want to do a program where I can introduce, and something that she would do is that she would go to different restaurants every week just to try different foods. So she was really a foodie, but she also loved hanging out with teenagers. She said, you know what? It would be great if I could just hang out with teenagers all day and introduce them to all different types of cuisine. Like, okay, well,
that sounds like a rough life right there.
For her, she loved it, right? So how are we going to do that? Well, lo and behold, she found a grant that was dealing with childhood obesity. And you probably say, okay, now how in the world do you make that work? Well, there was a funder that wanted to reduce childhood obesity. And they said, we're looking for people with creative programming that can help reduce childhood obesity. She said, I know how to do that. I can teach kids how to cook healthy food. Teenagers, food, health. You blend those things together, and out of that came a culinary arts program for us. A culinary arts program that we hired professional chefs to come in and teach kids how to cook healthy food, and their field trips were to all these nice restaurants that she likes to go to. And it was just a marriage of beauty, right? She got to hang out with teenagers and do food. The funder knew that kids were being taught healthy food choices. They were being taught how to prepare healthy food at home. and it was reaching a childhood obesity problem. So deliverables and measurables. So one of the things we want to know, like surveys, asking the kids coming in, how many of you eat cucumbers and tomatoes and zucchini and all these healthy foods? Let's see where they were when they started this program, and now let's measure them after a year being in the program. How many of them like those foods? How many of them are increasing that? Because for the funder, that's what they want to know. How many of you cook meals at home now? Is there a change in the number of meals you cook at home versus how many times you went to McDonald's? Like, those are things that align and that are super easy, but they're measurables of the progress and of the success of the program. How many of you have had a choice now, would prefer to have food cooked at home versus a fast food? And you'd be surprised. A lot of it is just exposure. The kids that we were serving, a lot of them, they didn't eat vegetables because they'd never had vegetables cooked for them. They never knew how to cook them. They never knew how to make them taste good. And so our chefs were great at lending to even cultural dishes that a lot of our teenagers had, and teaching them how to do healthier versions of things that they normally cooked at home. And so for us, that was fully grant funded, and it was a win-win-win-win-win all around. The funder was happy because children were learning healthy food. The young lady who ran the program, she was happy because she was hanging out with teenagers and getting to eat all day. And we were happy because now we have teenagers that are in our culinary arts program that also are now coming to our church in our youth group because they're hanging out with one of our staff who also loves Jesus, and every chance she gets, she's telling them about it, right? And inviting them to church on Sunday. So it's a win-win-win all around.
That's right. And if you can get grant funding to be a foodie, you can get grant funding for anything.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think I better make sure none of my staff hears that, because they might try to find a different avenue for their income here rather than Rollerson. And that's just incredible. So I want to go back, because several things that you've said, both the renewal thing that happens based on how that grant's written, right? 1 to 5 years, however it's renewed. And then you were talking about how the needs of your city have changed over the course of 20 years. So I'm imagining that there were initiatives that you started and that you got grants for, that you, looking at the needs of the community, said, that's no longer needed. The funding might still be available, but this specific idea is not available, and you called a stop to it. And then I'm guessing that there were other things that you thought, maybe I don't know this, but I'm wondering, were there other things that you thought, we really need to keep this going, and the funding ran out? And then how did you navigate both of those scenarios?
Okay, that's a great question. Let's see. One thing that we decided that we had funding for, and that we later decided not to continue, was not that it wasn't a need in our community, but we did realize that among our team, we didn't have the team that we needed to carry it out. And that was our high school sports that we had in our school. When we started it, we had a great team that was working well, but we realized that the more that we grew, it kind of grew beyond our ability to manage it well, and for it to represent our ministry. So that was one thing that we decided that we had to stop, which is not an easy decision to make. Another thing is
Can I ask a question about that real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, I heard you say basically the reason you stopped it was for integrity. We wrote the grant saying we could do this. Now we're looking at our team and we're saying we can't do it in the way we wrote this grant anymore. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
So that's incredible. So were there funds left unspent? Did you have to send those? Here's the reason I'm asking. Pastors say, hey, I want to start this initiative. We all know things happen, right? So what happens if we're not able to carry it out? What if the focus has to shift for some reason? Then what do we do? So did you have money left over? Did you have to send it back, or did you wait till the end of that funding to actually call it a stop and not renew it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that we have learned in the process is we try not to box ourselves in, right? Mm-hmm. And what do I mean by that? Is that when we write our proposals, we write them specific enough to align with our funders, but they are general enough that it gives us room to pivot. So our funding, specifically for this particular program that you're talking about, was for sports education, right? So the general consensus was sports education. We chose at the time to morph that into a football team and a baseball team, right? Sports education was always at the heart of what we did, but the teams were something that we were able to do out of that, right? So when we decided that we weren't going to do the teams anymore, it didn't mean that we lost the funding. It just meant that the sports education, we had to fall back and specifically work on the sports piece. So then it became strength and conditioning, fitness, and we still did the sports education. We just took away the team element of it because that part was growing too big. If you know anything about Miami, sports, and especially when you're successful with sports, it grows really, really fast. And so we found ourselves in a situation where we were attracting a lot of athletes in a way that it was very difficult to manage based on their experiences that they had, but we still maintained the sports piece, the fitness, the training, the agilities. We kept all of that. We just shut down the team.
Yeah, perfect. So what about one that you like, man, we want to keep this going, but the funding stopped for whatever reason? Did you have any of that?
Yeah, actually we did. We had a program that we used to do. It was actually in a local school, and it was called Hip Arts. It was a blend of hip hop and arts. Kids were taught basically called lyricism, but essentially writing. They learned DJing. They also learned dancing, and it was really built around that. That particular program, that was one program that we had to stop for two reasons. One, that I'll be totally transparent. It's one of those instances where the funding stopped, but not because the funding wasn't available. This funding stopped because of integrity on our side, right? We made a decision regarding a hire with someone that we did not follow through on the background check. And because we didn't follow through on the background check, which we should have, because we took the word of someone else, it came back to bite us later. And so we had to swallow the pill on that one and say, you know what? That happened to us this time, but it won't ever happen to us again, because what it did is it spoke to our character, and we had a real great history of working with a particular funder, but then you get this sort of blotch on your record because here it is, we didn't follow through in our process of what we should do. And so for that reason, when it came time and said, you know what, once again, we have to make the decision. We could press through this and make it work. But because it was already sort of this tainted kind of space, we said it's probably not best for us, because although this is a good person, like, we're going to have this blemish on our record if we continue down this path and the scrutiny of it. So that was the program that we no longer did. And we also learned a valuable lesson that, one, we don't cut corners. We wait the time that's necessary. We do our due diligence up front, right? And there are times you have to take those lumps and you kind of have to learn the hard way. But we learned the hard way, so now we can help people not make the same mistakes we did.
So good. And it's all, again, about integrity as you develop these relationships and partnerships, so that there's sustainable ministry that comes out and flows from you. So that's just incredible. Keisha, Dianna, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I think you guys have done an excellent job of letting pastors and leaders know that this is possible, especially, I'm sorry, I've got to refer to this again, but especially with the foodie story, because if that kind of grant funding is available, my goodness, the ideas God's given you could just be an email away. So if you need help getting started, here's what you can do. You can email the 305unlimited@gmail.com. Dianna and or Keisha would love to connect with you, help get you started. The other thing you need to absolutely do, you need to get this book, Provision for the Vision. You can get it at Amazon.com, obviously. And also you can visit their website, which is also the 305unlimited.com. So reach out, get connected, because they want to help you find the provision that's available for the vision that God's given you. So thanks for joining the DNA podcast. But wait, there's some special information that I've got to get to you right now, because there's incredible things happening with Destiny Network and some events that we want you to be aware of. Coming up May 13th in Virginia Beach, Virginia, is our church planting intensive. And if you've ever thought about planting a campus, planting a church, or maybe you've got a leader or somebody on your staff that has it in their heart to plant a church, you need to get them to this church planting initiative on May 13th. You can go to destiny-network.com, click on where it says events. It's right at the top of the page, and you're going to see that event that you can get registered for. But you're also going to see another special event, and that's Affecting Destiny, that's coming up September 22nd through the 24th. We want to meet you in Clewiston, Florida, for a great 3 days as we seek God together and believe God for great things. So don't miss Affecting Destiny. Go sign up, go register right now, destiny-network.com. Click on events. We want to see you at those events. And thank you for joining the Destiny Network Amplified podcast. I can't wait for you to join us next month.